All biological organisms, to a greater or lesser degree, depending on the species, react to stimuli by changing themselves and their environment. In humans, these transformations take place mainly because of their extraordinary ability to imagine such changes. Over 17,000 years ago, in the caves of Slacus, a hybrid figure was painted. This had a human body and a bird head. This image shows that even such a long time ago, humans were able to imagine themselves as being transformed. During the course of history, human beings have been capable of intentionally changing even their own psyche, making use of psychotropic substances, of practices such as meditation, sleep deprivation, and fasting. Today, we know that every transformation that takes place at a neuropsychological level involves changes at the mental level, and we also have the equipment that allows us to control neural activity. The idea of an art that makes use of scientific equipment able to affect the brain's activity came to me when studying the experiments conducted by Manuel Delgado in the 60s. This idea became a reality when I found out about the existence of equipment for transcranial magnetic stimulation, and I became convinced that their non-invasiveness could facilitate the transition from a dual art, in which the viewer and the creator are two separate entities, to an art in which experiences are self-induced, and every mind can then partially or fully transform itself with instantaneous effect. The first exhibition of Neuropsychoart dates back to 2004 and was held in the Apeiron Gallery in Cancun, Mexico. The following text was presented there. The works of Neuropsychoart are based on the study of neuroscience, psychiatry, and psychology, and have as their main goals to lead those individuals who experience it to the perception of every single aspect of the mind in as separate a way as possible. The temporary induction of psychotic symptoms considered by Neuropsychoart to be incarnations of philosophical problems, to transform neuroscientific and psychological experiments into artistic experiences. Some neuroscientific techniques will soon be able to be used to create neural networks which are completely different from genetically programmed ones, and from those which are determined by the environment. These new networks will have related experiential which are at present unimaginable, particularly those which will emerge from the development of repetitive transcranial magnetic stimulation. The artistic experiences which derive from the use of these techniques can be considered as self-creations of the mind. Both philosophy and the sciences, in the course of their history, have had to gradually give up distinguishing between what the ancient Greeks called aletheia, namely indisputable truth that is self-evident, and what they call doxa, or fallacious opinions. However, this progressive erasure of the distinction between reality and appearance, which took place in the theoretical field, has not been matched by a similar disappearance in the judgments concerning empirical life. Nevertheless, even in this context, this distinction seems destined to disappear, due particularly to the development of technologies that with increasing effectiveness allow for the overlapping of what is real and what is virtual. Some works of Neuropsychoart focus as their main objective on leading those who experience them to a midpoint where everything becomes a little less than real and a little more than unreal. Hallucinosis and hallucinations are perceptions without an object, but differ from hallucinations as those who experience them are convinced they are detecting something that does not belong to external reality. From the point of view of Neuropsychoart, hallucinosis are an example of embodied philosophy, since they create the balance between the intensity of aspects judged as being unreal and that of aspects judged as real. This can be used to clearly show that the distinction between these aspects is only a cultural product which can be overcome. In this work, the person looks in the mirror and sees a reflection of their own face. A video is projected on top of this reflection, showing ants that seem to be eating their forehead. While this is happening, you can hear. You can really benefit by watching the ants that seem to be devouring your forehead. If you imagine that every single bite discovers a bit more of the nothing that is in you. Their actions do not cause any pain, and so you can observe it with detachment. To discover that, in reality, the nothing that is in you does not need to be freed, because you cannot cover or discover it. Therefore, their work is both useful and useless. In usual visual experiences, when the phenomena that attract our attention are not in the middle of our field of vision, they cause an immediate eye movement that we can place them in the centre of our vision. It is nevertheless possible to move visual attention while maintaining our gaze on what is in front of us, as demonstrated by experiments on hidden attention conducted by Hermann von Helmholtz in 1894. The auto-visualizer is a tool designed to facilitate the movement and maintaining of attention on the edge of the field of vision, where you can check experientially the continuity between being and non-being, that fade into each other, giving rise to an area that cannot be considered to exist or non-exist. From this ambiguous zone, the user will try to digress their gaze onto nothing. They will inevitably fail, but if they persevere in this endeavour, through such failures, they may perceive the inseparability of being from not being. Such relationships often deceive us. While detecting the changing nature of phenomena, a person simultaneously identifies their own emptiness, and then consciousness and unconsciousness. Life and death appear to them as if they were their own limits. The hidden attention of the person taking part in this experience focuses on two twirling lights which gradually and continually go in and out of the field of vision, while their gaze is firmly fixed on a black dot in front of them. Auditory hallucinations may consist of voices that advise, criticize, or accuse. This symptom is almost always central to schizophrenia, and patients who experience it develop delusional ideas in an attempt to explain it. Normally, the voices are generated from normal thoughts, which become louder and louder until, in the mind of the subject, they become real, heard voices. Although they are auditory hallucinations, the most distressing psychotic manifestation, which must be considered on a par with dissociative identity disorder, as a means through which you can learn about the multiplicity of trends that in the presence of absence, or rather the paradox, let's say, I join together or clash. The voices try to lead those who listen to them to the ambiguity of this symptom, where the same voices are at the same time intimate and alien. The person is asked to sit and wear opaque glasses which prevent them from seeing anything. Then, very close to their ear, a voice begins to whisper a text taken from Nietzsche's Birth of Tragedy. Simultaneously, another voice moves chaotically around the person, giving the impression of getting closer and further away. Their presence in the surroundings, although the speed and freedom of movements gives rise to the idea of a disembodied entity rather than a human one, and so to a presence similar to those in some auditory hallucinations.
Ogni traguardo che raggiungi diventa una piattaforma stabile,
narra che il re Mida inseguì a lungo nella foresta
da cui riesce ad
il saggio
osservare
Sileno, seguace
un
di
po' più
Dionisio,
chiaramente
senza prenderlo.
la nullità
Quando quello
che
gli
tenta
cadde
di
infine fra le mani,
dietro tutte le mete
il
future,
re domandò quale
che ad
fosse
ogni passo,
la cosa
che ad ogni
migliore
tappa
e più
diventano
desiderabile per l'uomo.
via
Rigido e
più
immobile,
prive di
il
senso,
demone tace, finché
invecchi
costretto
senza
dal re
imparare
esce da
gli
ultimo,
unici passi
fra stridule
che
risa,
vale la pena
in queste
di
parole:
fare. Sono quelli
stirpe miserabile ed
che si
effimera,
fanno
figlio del
indietreggiando,
caso e della pena, perché mi costringi a dirti ciò
preparandosi
che
sempre
per
meglio
te
alla
è
morte.
vantaggiosissimo non
Invecchiare
sentire?
così,
Il meglio
senza
è per
percepire
te
il
assolutamente
costante svolgimento della
irraggiungibile.
morte,
Non essere nato, non essere niente,
rende la tua vita
ma la
inutile a
cosa
se
in
stessa.
secondo luogo migliore per te è
Questa
morire
voce
presto.
che io sono in te, mettila come sottofondo di tutto ciò che vivi e perderai molto più dolore di quanto ti possa arrecare.
From early childhood, associative conditioning links, in a more or less stable way, sensations of different types. So almost all our perceptions can be considered, to some extent, as synesthetic. Obviously, the degree of integration of the different sensory components and their proportions vary greatly from one perception to another. For example, the sensations that relate to each specific type of food are highly integrated with each other. The use of a synesthetic measurement by means of associative conditioning allows for perceptive remodeling and, as such, the development of new and intense synesthetic perceptions as well as their deconstruction. In order to experience this, the participant, with their eyes closed, observes a light that changes colour. This happens every time their hand, resting on the rotating wheel, touches a different texture. At the same time, they perceive a sequence of sounds and smells. The term depersonalization refers to a condition in which the perceptions about your own body, and even your own emotions, are felt with a deep sense of detachment. This condition often occurs when the conflict between some views in someone's mind grows stronger, giving rise to an intense meta-perception. Self-awareness, or consciousness, is the meta-perceptive state in which subjectivity, detected as being unification of voices, judges itself as being opposed to them. Depersonalization is therefore not antithetical to self-awareness, but rather the inevitable outcome of its intensification. The work Coexistence aims to promote a temporary condition of depersonalization in its users. A person with a white mask on their lips observes their face reflected in a mirror, and a video of a mouth reciting a passage from the novel by Pirandello, One, No One and 100,000, is projected onto the mask. This combination of a person's own body parts and external ones creates a perception of an ambiguous face, which, at the same time, is considered to be their own and foreign. Mirror neurons are neurons found in the premotor cortex of the brain. These neurons are activated both when we observe movements being made by others, as well as when we make them ourselves. They provide us with first-hand knowledge of what another person feels. The hypertrophizer for mirror neurons increases identification with others and aims for changes observed to be perceived as your own. A person sits with their legs under a glass table with a black cloth on it. The cloth is lifted to reveal a screen placed horizontally below the glass table. The monitor plays a video clip in which there are two men's legs in the same position as the participants. They have been filmed from the same angle so that the viewer sees them in place of their own. While in the clip two hands appear and start massaging the virtual legs, the viewer actually receives a similar massage. After a few minutes, the video of the female legs replaces the male ones on the clip. In 2009, some of my photographs, with both pleasant and unpleasant elements, were used in an experiment on emotional confusion. This research took place in the laboratory of clinical and behavioural neurology at the Santa Lucia Foundation in Rome. In the experiment, the subjects were shown in my pictures, and they had to judge the positivity and negativity. These judgments were then compared with others, relating to the same images, and given by the same individuals after receiving repetitive transcranial magnetic stimulation on the supplementary motor area of the cerebral cortex, an area that seems responsible for the control of emotions. The scientific goal of the experiment was to confirm the function of this neural area. However, from a point of view of Neuropsychoart, the goal was to let the participants experience, for a few minutes, a condition that is common in many psychoses. Soon, every human nervous system will be able to generate their own neuropsychoartistic experiences using a software capable of interpreting information coming from functional MRI of the brain, and so recognize every intention by detecting the specific neural activity related to it, and then translate it immediately into commands for an apparatus for transcranial magnetic stimulation. The self-determination which Neuropsychoart hopes for, therefore, derives from a nervous system which determines, second after second, every single change we make, thanks to the advanced instruments that neuroscientific research has produced and will produce in the future. Just as a geometric point with its non-dimensionality limits what surrounds it, so the subjective aspect of the psyche, with its non-existence, makes conceivable and brings together the multiplicity of the mind. This diversity is made up of all the basic sensations, whose conflicts, along with their outcomes, we can define as motivation or will. The human mind, which is self-determining, can therefore not be thought of as the home of a little man who decides, but rather as an expression of the inseparable bond between static and dynamic. One of the outcomes generated by a self-regulating nervous system might also be to entrust the production of inputs to the brain to a software that generate them in an unpredictable and random way. When Neuropsychoart has crossed these boundaries, will knowing yourself mean having lived and being able to recall every possible state of mind, or to have acquired, through countless experiences, a profound conviction that the psychic manifestations cannot be narrowed down to a finite set?